The latest chapter of Boruto was much less of a narrative-focused chapter as it was a plot-intensive chapter, with all the new bits of information and subtle hints toward future developments, many of which I found extremely interesting, and so I want to outline those new bits of information and what they can mean moving forward, as well as my general thoughts on the ideas and whether I particularly like them or not. So the first thing to note is that just like Shikamaru told Kawaki and the others, Sarada is also pointing out the fact that Boruto is here to help and even save Sarada's life. And despite initially coming off harsh and pushing against the idea of cooperating with Boruto, both Konohamaru and Nishi eventually work with Boruto to take Hidari down. And Konohamaru even jumps in front of Boruto and uses his Rasen barricade to protect Boruto from one of Hidari's attacks. And I really like the sequence of events a lot because no matter how much they resent Boruto for what he allegedly did to Naruto, Hinata, and Kawaki, if Boruto keeps on protecting the village and being mostly friendly with everyone as best he can, the villagers are eventually gonna have no choice but to trust Boruto. Even if some of them never fully forgive Boruto just like those ninja with Sasuke in chapter 60, they're still going to trust him because Boruto will have earned that trust. I think that's great. Completely contradicting that though, similar to when Shikamaru confronted Boruto on the topic in chapter 8, Boruto was asked on two separate occasions where his info was coming from, first by Konohamaru and second by Kawaki, and in both cases Boruto acted rather suspicious and did not answer the question, similar to how Boruto never answered Shikamaru's question about how much he actually knows. Boruto may have been pretty sly when he brushed off the question with Konohamaru because of their situation with Hidari, but he was getting pressed a lot harder by Kawaki the second time around. Of course, in all three cases, Boruto was saved by some sort of distraction popping up like a get-out-of-jail-free card that allowed him to avoid answering the question. But with someone as persistent as Kawaki asking the question now, Boruto's not going to be able to escape Kawaki's interrogation, and if Boruto continues to not answer Kawaki's question, he's gonna start to look rather suspicious in the eyes of everyone around him, except for Sarada and Sumire and maybe Shikamaru. Now, in light of Boruto's secrecy and Koji telling Shikamaru not to look back in chapter 9, it's obvious that Boruto and Koji are trying to keep Koji's identity and survival a secret, but without knowing that information or why Boruto is withholding it, the villagers can't help but view Boruto rather suspiciously. At the end of the day, Boruto does look sus, so while he takes a step forward every time he protects the village, he also takes a step backwards every time he withholds information, oddly similar to Amato in that regard. And I like this a lot for Boruto's struggle to overcome the situation created by omnipotence. So far, Boruto's been on a bit of a roll with success after success in this regard, but hopefully his secrecy around Kashin Koji will spark some unrest in the people he's beginning to overcome. Only time will tell if they actually cash in on this or not though. Now, for a quick aside since I'm going in chronological order, I just want to say the way Hidari used the claw marks in tandem with the claw grind was awesome and exactly how I wish Code continued to use his powers after his limiters were removed. It feels like this was half the purpose of the claw grind to begin with. It would have been nice to see Code using them like this, but better Hidari than no one I guess. Either way, this was a really cool fight sequence from start to finish, and we got a few new tidbits during the fight as well as a nice artistic parallel to Minato using Flying Raijin to hit Obito with the Rasengan, and Naruto using Tobirama's Flying Raijin to hit Ten Tails Obito with the Rasengan, when Boruto used Flying Raijin to hit Hidari with the Rasengan, which I thought was pretty cool. Beyond that though, Sarada finally revealed the new jutsu in her arsenal, Chidori Stream, and we were also shown how Hidari heals himself and why he went in and out of the claw marks the way he did in chapter 11. And that's because he teleported back to the mysterious tree dimension with the claw mark cube in order for that tree to attach itself to Hidari to heal his wounds. Now, I definitely plan to do a video on this topic, but given that that giant tree acted on its own to heal Hidari and all the Shinju are allegedly self-aware divine trees, who are seemingly both Ten Tails and Divine Tree at the same time because they haven't fully evolved into a proper divine tree, I'm starting to wonder if that giant tree is actually what the main body of the Ten Tails turned into and why it mysteriously disappeared all of a sudden. Perhaps it took root in the ground that it was laying on, and we didn't see it anymore because it was growing upside down underground for whatever reason, and that tree is essentially a partially evolved Ten Tails that's part way to becoming a divine tree, but hasn't yet fully evolved into a proper one, and it also likely may have gained sentience as well, whatever that looks like for a tree. Now obviously there's a ton of implications stemming off from this idea, some of which I'll return to later on and some of which I'll return to in future videos, such as the question of what Jura and the other Shinju actually are, but for now I want to leave it at that. That tree might be what the Ten Tails became, very similar to how those random claw grime turned into the trees that are holding Sasuke and the others. Getting back to the Hidari fight, one of my favorite things about this chapter was honestly the reveal of what the heck the planet's chakra that Boruto speaks of actually is. It's just the energy of the centrifugal force accompanying a planet's rotation in orbit. As for why they ever thought it was a good idea to call this the planet's chakra and wait 8 chapters to explain that it's not actually the planet's chakra, I have no idea. But now that they finally explained what it actually is, I feel very relieved.
That was close.
Because even the databook page for Uzuhiko on the Naruto website made it abundantly clear that the planet's chakra was not the same as nature energy. So this whole time I've been wondering what the heck this stupid planet's chakra is, and whether or not it's just the rotational forces of the planet like I thought, or if it was something more than that. So needless to say, the confirmation of the planet's chakra put my endlessly active mind at ease. And even though it works seamlessly with my previous Rasengan Uzuhiko video, I'd like to do an updated one that expands upon it even further, since I like doing the science breakdowns of these types of techniques, and I'll discuss the whole limitless power of the Uzuhiko thing in that video as well. And while it's hardly a weakness given how quickly Boruto absorbed enough energy to create a giant tornado vortex that blew Hidari to smithereens, I did like the addition of a condition for Boruto's use of this jutsu, which is that he needs to take in the planet's energy through both feet directly from the earth, so he can't fly around and still absorb this energy. Another small detail I found particularly interesting, especially in accordance with Boruto's fight against Code, is that Boruto has what appears to be a few Uzuhiko swirls around his right hand when he hits Hidari with the Rasengan earlier in the chapter. And if you recall, Boruto actually initiated the Uzuhiko with that same right hand in his fight against Code, and he told Code that he was halfway there when he transferred some of those swirls onto Code's arm after he grabbed Boruto's right hand. Having seen something oddly similar from Boruto in both the Code and Hidari fights, I'm wondering if the Uzuhiko requires a 2-step process that he's yet to reveal, where he must first make contact with his opponent using his own chakra as an energy source, before landing the actual hit that uses the planet's energy as his power source. As for exactly why he would need to do this 2-step process, I'm not entirely sure, but at the very least it would explain his actions in the whole "I'm already halfway there" line in a way that goes beyond merely taunting Code. And it would also add another condition to his overpowered use, something to keep it from being too strong against every opponent. So while I can't say for sure whether or not this is in fact the case, I personally do hope it is, just to keep things grounded and consistent with the Naruto lore. Every jutsu has a weakness, and I don't want the Uzuhiko to be the first without one. Now the last few additions from this chapter are by far the most interesting in my opinion. After Kawaki finishes off Hidari, Hidari's ashes reconstitute into a spiky chakra fruit or flower looking thing that Kashin Koji calls a Thorn Soul bulb, and this is where the Kawaki interrogation comes into play, where Kawaki asks Boruto who gave him this info. But like I said a while earlier, Boruto never answers Kawaki's question, continuing to keep Kashin Koji a secret from everyone else. But even more interesting than the secrecy of Kashin Koji is the fact that Kashin Koji is the informant. And it's not just conjecture on Koji's part. He's actually seen a Thorn Soul bulb before, and he knows that it can be used to save people like Sasuke who've been turned into a tree. The question is, how?
But how? I don't get it!
How does Kashin Koji know all this? When and where did he get this info? There's only a handful of possible explanations, and for the sake of this video I'll just list a bunch without going into much detail, and keep in mind that these don't all have an equal likeliness of occurring. Some are only making the list because they feel within the realm of possibility for this series. So the options that come to mind are that Kashin Koji learned most of this information from Amato or Jigen while he was in Kara, and was shown a Thorn Soul bulb at some point during that time. Koji learned this information from Orochimaru after escaping from Ishiki, where Orochimaru did some experiments that mimic what's happening with the Shinju now, and he saw a Thorn Soul bulb from said experiment. Koji simply saw a Thorn Soul sprout from the Sasuke tree or whoever else, and either witnessed or deduced what it would do to the Ten Tails and how it could be reversed. Koji saw an evolved claw grime like the one that fought Kawaki devour someone, and it had a different effect, where it turned into a Shinju like Hidari instead of a tree like Sasuke, and then Koji defeated that Shinju and retrieved its Thorn Soul. Koji saw an evolved Clawgram absorb the chakra of another tree person, and then it turned into a Shinju like Hidari, and then Koji defeated that Shinju, retrieved its Thorn Soul, and implanted it into the tree person to restore them back to normal. Koji is actually part Ten Tails, or was somehow involved in his creation, and that's why he knows about all this, similar to his feelings of sentimentality towards the Leaf Village because of Jiraiya. Koji somehow had some sort of vision or premonition of the future, and that's how he seems to know everything that's about to happen. Or Koji did some time travel shenanigans where he either traveled forward in time and saw what happens in the future, or traveled back in time to prevent what happens in the future. Or potentially a combination of some of these options. Let me know in the comments which options you think are the most likely, as well as any other possibilities you've thought of that you think are somewhat reasonable too. Now, besides Kashin Koji's knowledge on the topic, the Thorn Soul itself is also an interesting discussion. What exactly is this thing? What does it do? And how was it formed? Obviously, I'd like to do a solo video on the topic, but I think we can take a quick look at these things. Based on its appearance, what it seemingly was inside Hidari, and the fact that it's essential to saving Sasuke and the other tree people, I suspect that Hidari's Thorn Soul bulb is the crystallization of what the Ten Tails or Divine Tree took from Sasuke, not so different from a chakra fruit in that regard. And from here, I see two general possibilities for how the Shinju were formed. Either the giant tree in that mysterious dimension received Sasuke's chakra from the Sasuke tree, causing a branch of that giant tree to turn into Hidari, or the giant tree acquires Sasuke's chakra from the Sasuke tree, and then transfers it to a Clawgram, perhaps an evolved Clawgram like the one that chokeslammed Kawaki, or maybe one that's evolved even more than that, where that Clawgram then transforms into Hidari. Now, there is a little bit of a chicken or the egg situation between the Thorn Souls and the Shinju, whether the Thorn Souls simply formed inside the Shinju that were formed via one of the two mechanisms I described earlier, or if the Thorn Souls formed first and then the Shinju were formed second, which would make the most sense if a Clawgram ate a Thorn Soul in order to transform into a Shinju. As for which order it is and whether the Shinju sprouted from the giant tree or if they are simply transformed Clawgram, it doesn't really matter too much to me. I just think that Sasuke's chakra gets transferred either to that giant tree in that mysterious dimension or to an evolved Clawgram in order to form Hidari. But by returning that Thorn Soul, which is likely the crystallization of Sasuke's essence, back to Sasuke, perhaps the Sasuke tree gets reverted back to his original form. And maybe there's a couple of intermediary steps in between that we don't know about yet. That being said, if I had to choose between the Clawgram and the tree mechanisms, I would probably prefer the Shinju to be transformed Clawgram, evolved Clawgram in particular, so that the Clawgram feel like more of a threat and the evolved Clawgram feel more special, rather than just useless baggage. Now, as a quick remark without going into any detail, I'm not pulling these ideas out of my ass just for fun. I'm actually basing the concept on the process by which Black Zetsu restored Kaguya, and regardless of whether or not the Boruto series ever makes this comparison, it would still establish a point of consistency between Naruto and Boruto. It would even help to better explain Kaguya's resurrection process, which I only see as a good thing. Now, something else I want to point out is that having seen what a Thorn Soul looks like, it starts to recontextualize the design of Jura's cloak in the top of that claw mark cube, which can possibly be viewed as the symbol of the Thorn Soul now. As far as the implication of that goes, I can't say for sure. Maybe it means that Clawmark Cube is the Ten Tails' Thorn Soul or some other connection, or maybe it's just a coincidental design choice by Ikimoto. Only time will tell. Now, the last things to look at are Jura's words and actions at the end of the chapter. After shooting Boruto and Sarada with the Biju laser beam, Jura either sucks Hidari's Thorn Soul toward himself or the Thorn Soul flies towards Jura on its own, eerily reminiscent of Kinshiki's chakra fruit flying towards Momoshiki, and Jura declares his intent to kill Boruto instead of using him as an otsutsuki sacrifice. And from this point forward, I only really see 4 possibilities for Jura's next move. Option 1 is that Jura leaves to go restore Hidari's body using his Thorn Soul bulb, and then comes right back with Hidari and possibly Bug and Matsuri to kill Boruto. Option 2 is that Jura leaves to restore Hidari's body, and then decides to take some time to devise a new strategy before making such a move on Boruto, meaning that's basically the end of the Shinju for this arc. Option 3 is that Jura just holds on to Hidari's Thorn Soul bulb and puts it in his pocket while he takes on Boruto and the others with the intent of restoring Hidari after he's finished with his business. And option 4 is that Jura consumes Hidari's Thorn Soul to power himself up, paralleling the scene of Momoshiki eating Kinshiki's chakra fruit to power himself up in the first arc of part 1, which would likely signify the end of Hidari's character. I personally think all 4 of these options are pretty reasonable choices for Jura to make, but if it were up to me, I'd prefer Jura to choose either options 1 or 3, as the Shinju have realistically been the main antagonistic forces of this arc, so they really should be present in the 3rd act of this story arc. Now you could interpret Boruto's struggle in this arc to actually be against the village as he attempts to regain their trust, in which case you don't actually need the Shinju to stick around since the final battle can simply take place against Kawaki in the village instead. But if that is the case, then Boruto really needs to face a loss in regards to the village's trust before heading into the 3rd act of the arc, which is yet to happen. However, I do think that Boruto's secrecy around Kashin Koji and his constant withholding of information like Amato could serve as the foundation for the village actively distrusting Boruto independent of his traitor status, so I do think there is room for this type of conflict to be the focus of the next few chapters. That isn't to say that it will be the focus, just that I can understand if it is the focus. But just going off of Jura's dialogue, it still feels like the Shinju will be involved in the final act of this arc, bringing us back to options 1 or 3. I will also add that Boruto's narrative battle can still be against the Leaf Village even while fighting Jura, but that's a topic for another video. As for option 4, this is definitely by far my least favorite option, simply for the fact that Hidari's character has insane potential, but has only scratched the surface of that potential. As it stands, his character is very much incomplete, and his interactions with other characters thus far such as Boruto and Sarada has left much to be desired, so it feels like a complete waste to have Hidari die off now, to the point that he might as well have never existed in the first place if this is the route they plan to go. So hopefully they don't do something like this anytime soon. But under the hypothetical that they do have Jura eat Hidari in the near future, then I personally would like to see Code eat Bug and Kawaki eat Matsuri at some point as a means of gaining power in an otsutsuki-like manner, which they can just do anyway regardless of what Jura does, but that's a topic for another video as well. And I think that covers everything of importance in this chapter as far as the plot mysteries go. I'm very curious what you guys think about all these plot points and my ideas about them, so please let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.